Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Beyond Borders by MSA. For those that don't know, MSA Novo is one of the only global institutional funds systematically investing in emerging technology markets. And with Beyond Borders, we host the world's leading technology founders and game changers. And I'm super excited to have Suhas and Prashant here with us on episode 2. I will leave you to introduce yourselves. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks. No, thanks so much, Sarah. I think super excited to have this discussion today. And like we were all discussing, I think the market that Prashant has been building in, spiritual tech especially, might be, slightly new to people outside India, but in India, it is huge. And we'll talk more about that over the next 30 to 45 minutes. Quick intros on both sides. Maybe my name is Suhas, and I run one of Asia's largest product communities called the Product Folks. We're today over 150,000 strong and 100% volunteer driven. So if you're interested in checking out some interesting products like the one Prashant's building out of India and Asia, do check out the Product Folks. But today, I think it's all going to be about AppsForBharat and Prashant's journey. And for everyone tuning in, I can assure you, you'll be blown away with some of the numbers that we're going to be chatting about and some of the insights that Prashant has learned over the last couple of years. Prashant, I'll kick off with just a very small introduction for those who are new to the spiritual market, and then a very very brief background into Sri Mandir. Then we'd love to go deeper into your journey, building Sri Mandir, building stuff in the past, the challenges and the opportunity that lie ahead. For those who haven't checked it out yet, it is a devotional app from India that is dedicated to helping millions of Indians in their spiritual and devotional journey. And today we will hear from Prashant, who has been building this for the last 3 years now. Prashant, we'd love to kick this off with, first of all, how did you even stumble upon this space and think about building an app in this space?
Sure. Thank you, Suhas. First of all, I've been watching the Indian startup ecosystem fold for over a decade now. And I have been, for the first 4 or 5 years of this decade, I was watching it from the sidelines. And I saw a lot of physical behaviors become digital, totally digital. I used to buy magazines, sports magazines, some sci-fi magazines in 2012, 13 when I was a student. Now you don't see them anywhere. Two, I used to carry a lot of cash in my wallet. We don't see them anywhere anymore. If you just think about this, right? A lot of these deep behaviors, which we thought would stay physical, have moved digital for most people. So Suhas, I'm a big believer of that every behavior for an average Indian user that was majorly offline or physical will become digital. Now I'll quickly tell you my own observations. I've been observing this behavior unfold over the last 10, 12 years now. Now, 2012, 2013, I used to buy magazines in sports, in electronics, that electronics for you and so on. It was a predominant behavior for many of us. Today, when I talk to an engineering graduate who is deep into these acts, would not buy a magazine. So essentially, if you see, right, cohort 10 years back, cohort now, that behavior has entirely switched. Same with something like cash. Same with many more. I think if you just think out categories, right, how we used to do X, Y, and Z things and how they're happening today, there is a total switch of behavior. In some cases, we see complementary behavior. In some cases, we see a total switch. So I'm a big believer that every behavior that used to exist physically will have a digital counterpart. Now, I'm someone who comes from this background where my family is still into farming, and we are from this lower middle class background, and I actually come from a family which is overly religious. Now, the way we think about religion, or the way we think about devotion in my family, it was a way for us to reinforce hope for many of us. So my dad used to say that, let's say, hey, whenever you feel nervous, whenever you feel not sure about me. Now, I would say now let's say 20, 25 years fast forward, when I look back at my family, I realize that my family is a mass representation of what most of the India would look like. And when I just think about this, right, this deep behavior is giving a lot of hope, mental well-being to hundreds of millions of people every single day. Now, I would like to believe that people would find digital counterparts at some point in time, which will help them accomplish those needs in a much better way. And that is the starting point of my journey, where I thought that, hey, what are the deep behaviors that have existed in our people, which don't have a good app or a product serving them? And can I build something with all the experience that I have gathered over these years? And I realized devotion is one such category where there are hundreds of apps that are there in the Play Store, where there'll be apps around music, apps around literature, but most of these apps were built in a very short-sighted way. So if you download those apps, there's a demand, and when you download those apps, what you get is ads, a lot of ads. People will push you for transactions, whatnot. And I thought that this is the experience that Indian users who have this need don't deserve. They deserve a far better experience for that matter. And this is where I started thinking about if you were to move this behavior from offline to online, what are the key hooks around which you can build a product? And those key hooks essentially came from, again, physical behavior. So I started thinking about what are the physical activities that people do and at what frequencies. What are the things that people do on a daily basis, weekly basis, once in a monthly basis, or yearly basis. And I started thinking about, if I were to make an app around it, what it will look like. So 2020 Q1 was when we launched around 4 apps around some of these hooks. And the app that showed the highest promise was the Shri Mandir app. And that's
what are the other apps, if I may ask? Like, what are the 4 ideas?
Yeah. So there was this very simple app around literature. So we actually put together a lot of literature onto one app. It was a strong activation hook for people. People liked the idea, but the usage frequency was low. So people would use it once in a week, once in a month. So that was the first product. Another app that we built was a Panchang app, where people could come and consume Panchang. It showed much better frequency. But of course, the hook was not so strong. Third one was Shri Mandir. And the fourth one was putting lots of videos and content and music together in one place for the user and see how they would consume it. So essentially, these are the 4 2 to 3 pager apps that we had built for the users. And we saw which product creates the maximum amount of wow and which product builds a very high quality recall and initial retention. And when I was closely observing the feedback of the user. So what I did was, in the hamburger menu, I actually gave an option to give feedback on WhatsApp, and that WhatsApp essentially opened into our phones, basically. So where we used to get feedback from people, how they're using it and so on. And I realized this app, which is the Shri Mandir app, was actually showing this very high quality of user love, where I was like, hey, I've been trying to build apps for last 7-8 years of my life. I have not seen this kind of feedback. Worth chasing.
Yeah. No, I think this translates very well. While I was trying to, discover a little more about it, I saw you have a very, very high rating, 4.9 star on the Play Store, with over, I think, 10 million downloads now, right? I think that is very, very interesting, especially for a category leader, but also something that you have to create a category for. I don't think we saw something with such user love, because like you mentioned, say, 5 years ago, there were still a lot of apps on the Play Store, but these were largely filled with ads, right? So it maybe did solve the purpose, but like you said, I don't think with that kind of experience, user love would be what we're seeing today. I think from those initial days to what we see today, you've been able to translate user love. How exciting has this journey been? Because I'm sure when you started it, a lot of people, including the thoughts that I had, right? I was like, okay, hey, how did this really scale from an offline to an online behavior, right? Like even all the examples that you mentioned, maybe buying books, which we did offline earlier, and with Flipkart, just started with that as a category. Today, that has gone online. Very similar. I'm sure, over 3 years, you've seen some amount of this offline activity really come to online. But the early days would not have been easy. What are some of the feedback that really stuck with you, and how has that changed over the last 3 years?
Yeah. So I'll explain you the thought process, right? and also touch upon what is the real challenge with this particular market. Now, there is abundance of content supply. So we are not a content platform. So one thing that we were very sure that, hey, this content is all over YouTube. This content is, there are hundreds of websites that will give you this information. Then what is our position in this particular user's life? And we realized that we would want to be a space where people practice some of their deep habits, or we assist them in practicing their deep habits in some. So we realize the differentiation with respect to content and information is not going to be a lot. So hence, you have to give people things that they would need. And I'll explain what I mean here, right? So what we did was we started thinking about what do people do in their physical world, right? So for example, the problem with this particular space is that, and especially with Hinduism, is that there is no regime as such. Now, whatever level of devotion you would have, you would do things based on, with the intensity that is based on the devotion level that you have. For example, someone like you and me, who is who lives in Bangalore, very tech savvy, might celebrate festivals, and that's the time when we pray. That's 4 to 5 times a year. For someone who is, let's say, a businessman, runs a business, or someone in government job, someone who's preparing for jobs, someone who's trying to prepare for exams, they might start their day by just a regular check-in. They would go check into their God and say, hey, God, take care of me. I'm going to do my work. So that's their daily practice. Now, if they have more time, a certain percentage of them would go and, let's say, listen to some music or read a mantra. Or if they have more time, they might go and read a literature. Now, this is the spectrum in which the user is actually spread out. So depending on how much time do you have, how devotional you are feeling, you would do these practices. So for us, what we said was, from these experiments, Sri Mandir started becoming the space where you come in and you do Mansik Puja. I'll explain what does Mansik Puja really mean. So let's say you have a home temple, you would go and pray in front of it. Now we give you a similar or a 10x better experience here on the phone. So for example, when you come on the app, what you do is you choose the gods and goddesses that you believe in. You set up a shrine. So for example, if I'm from Maharashtra, I would choose my local gods and goddesses plus a few national gods and set up my temple. If I'm from Gujarat, I would again choose a certain set of gods and regional and national gods and set up my shrine. What we give you on top of it is bunch of tools. For example, digital bells, digital flowers, a lot of offerings that you can offer to the god. So people would come and they would say, hey, God. They would look at the face of the god or feet of the god, and they would close their eyes and they would offer these things. And in a minute or two, their daily check-in activity is done. Now, again, understanding that we built was not everybody prays daily. For some of them, it's a weekly use case. So people are ardent believers of, let's say, Lord Hanuman, and they would use the app every Tuesday. And if you push them to use the app on Wednesday and Thursday, they would not like it. For some of them, it's a daily use case. For some of them, it is very much, let's say, they feel low, they open the app. Now, we realized this behavior from Shri, where we said that, hey, this digital praying is happening, but people need more things. So a lot of women came to us and said, can you give us digital calendar, which is the almanac or panchang, for example, where I could see what day it is today, what festival it is today, and get the information. So we gave that to them. Then some people came to us and said, can you give us a lot of literature that we can keep with us and access it digitally whenever we need it? And then people asked for more tools and whatnot. So this is how the platform's engagement loop evolved. So people came for digital praying and they asked us more things, and we keep on giving them more things. So this is the last 2-year journey for us, where we kept on evolving things that they need. Now, the biggest problem to us in all of this was trust. We realized that when people open an app like Sri Mandir, they're looking for a digital calm space where they can connect. And hence, if you are breaking that by showing ads, obstructing that journey, that is never going to work, because people are coming for a space, a digital space which is secluded, gives you that kind of feeling. So we said, to turn this digital space into some sort of business or get some outcome from this, Ads is not the way. We figure out something else. So then we started thinking about what does this user need more, and this is how the journey evolved. But the bigger challenge that I see today is the problem of trust. The problem that has been in this space is there has been tens of or hundreds of apps that have come over the last 10 years. And everybody saw this devotee as a customer. Now, I would say there's nothing wrong about it. But when you treat a devotee as a golden goose and say, hey, he believes in something, will pay. And if you want to strike him hard multiple times to take that golden egg out, I have a fundamental problem with that. I feel there's a deep behavior. You build that trust. You be respectful about that behavior. You give him that space. And that user will open up his wallet whenever he feels comfortable with the platform. Now, this has been the journey that we have been trying to chase, and we believe that trust is the most important part, and the biggest problem with this particular space has been trust.
Prashant, from a product point of view, what have you guys done different to build this trust? Like, I know one part of it, yes, it takes time, but just from a pure UX point of view, just from the journey and experience, have you all done something significantly different that you think were from the existing apps then?
Yes. I'll give you simple examples. Point number one, familiarity builds trust. So, for example, I take you to a space which is, let's say I take you to a shop, and let's say you live, I'm assuming that, let's say you're from Bhopal. Let's assume this, right? And you have been living in a certain household which has a certain kind of aesthetic sense and so let's say if I take you to a new neighborhood and put you in this very minimal setting, you will not be very comfortable. So, for example, if I take you to a setting which is familiar, that's the first level. Familiarity leads to some sort of trust formation. So what we have done is, in one of the versions of the app, we actually chose the figures of the god which are very modern. They looked very chic, very clean design. And we realized that that association that people have built over the last 3-4 decades is through certain paintings or pictures that they've seen. For example, if I were to say, imagine Lord Ganesha, me and you would imagine a certain 5-6 images in our head. And those images were actually created 50 years back or 30 years back, 20 years back. So what we did was we said, we'll not create new imagery and make a modern temple. We would actually pass on those references to the user. Point number two, lot of skeuomorphism, where we said that a bell should look like a bell, a flower should look like a flower, and so on. A little bit of chaos, because when you actually, let's say, go to a home temple, and if I can show you the home temple, the office temple that I have here, the small shrine that I've put here, there's like, you put a flower, you put some akshat, which is Swvl, you put some sindoor and so on. So essentially, after the puja is done, it looks slightly chaotic, where it marks that something has been done here. So, lot of physical word references is what we try to draw when we were building the temple interface. Two, communication. When you communicate to the user, you communicate in very clean language, tell him what it means and whatnot. So essentially, we try to go to a point where we said that, hey, let's go as deep as we can, understand this user behavior and see if we can draw patterns. I'll give a simple example, right? If you would use any music, and this is not the most important example, but I'll give you another example, right? So let's say if you go to any music player, for example, you would see this icon which has this circle with 2 arrows. Now, we did a dipstick, and what we realized was young people like you and me would understand what does that mean, which is play it once, like loop the playlist or and so on. Whereas a long tail user, which is not so tech savvy, would not understand this. So we have implemented a very simple way to communicate what does that mean. And all of these things build familiarity and trust for people. Point number 3, right? What we do is we do not push, even when we started monetizing, we don't push, hey, you should do this. It is not forced onto you. It's not just that. We don't show you any paid offerings on the day 1, day 2, day 3 of your journey.
Okay. Have you been able to identify what date, like, is there Like Facebook had this famous thing, right? 7 friends in 15 days, and then that user is going to stick on it. Have you been able, has data really been able to point you towards the right direction here?
It has been pointing us to, we are figuring that piece out. I'm saying in terms of monetization, we are figuring this piece out. In terms of product retention, we have identified key levers and we are working on it, and there are more levers that we have to add that we are actually working on. But the key engagement loops, we truly understand what a user is coming for and what he's seeking on the platform.
Got it. Got it. So you have been able to identify some patterns, right? Like I think which have been able to at least, yeah, maybe not on monetization, but at least on retention. Because I think a product like this, as long as that devotee and you as a platform have been able to build trust, and I think like you mentioned, over a long term there will be various offerings, and maybe we come to that now where we chat about in this space. First up is, yes, there's a very large market. You've been able to tap into it and get over 10 million downloads. Two questions for you here. First up, how really, like what channels, some strategies, and how did you really acquire the set of users? And I think second one is the talk of the town. Regardless, it is 2023 and everyone's been talking about, okay, hey, where does revenue really come from, right? So if you can just touch upon both these, that would be awesome.
Okay. One, how do we grow this particular plan, right?
Correct. So, like initial days, how did you start about? Maybe, if you remember some really anecdotal.
So for us, what we did was we said that, hey, we'll just focus on product building and growth is the second part. So basically, often what we confuse is product building and product marketing is what we tie together. And I'm not saying one approach is right and one approach is wrong. Often people prioritize growth over fixing the product. I think differently on this one. I feel that in the first 1 year of the journey, we said that, hey, let's just acquire the users, small set of users through paid channels every single day and see how do they use the app and how do they retain better. So the first 1 year of the app was just this, where we just acquired users through Facebook as a channel. But the good part was people loved the app. So even at that point in time, 17-18% of the installs were organic. Yeah, so basically we used to acquire people from Facebook as a channel. People used to come, love the app. There was a hamburger menu where it said, share the app. People used to go and share the app. If you just go and read the reviews, you'll see, I would say if you read 100 reviews, you'll see 7-8 reviews which will say, I got all my relatives, all my friends, my parents, my siblings to download this app. I sent this app to a relative in the US. Essentially, you'll actually read a lot of these reviews. Essentially, there's a good word of mouth and reinforcement that the app gets anyway. Today, we see 27-28% to 35% people coming organically on a daily basis. And we are making that switch where we have got to a point where we are now, let's say, using our activated users to get more users on the app. So from 17-18% way back to now 30% people being acquired organically is what the journey has been. They should go more. Now, second question was, you're saying, how are you monetizing? Now it sounds very, very good for every one of us when we think about 50 billion market, right? And I'll give you some backstory on this. In 2020, when I first started thinking about this whole space, a lot of people told me, why are you even building this particular category? There's so much of deadwood. What is it that you're chasing and so on? And I was like, there's a user, there's a large user need. This user is paying in the physical world. I have to figure out what he'll pay for in the digital world. But for the sheer user love and the gratitude that he's showering on the app, this should be built in. So, but I was lucky that actually, let's say the people who decided to back us, they could see what is the vision that we are carrying. So my point is, this space is not about acquiring a user and beating him down, take the golden egg and run away. This space needs an enablement across the ecosystem. If you were to truly, let's say, understand the deep enough potential of this particular space. My point is, there are temples who are low tech savvy. There is no tech savviness at all. There are devotees on the other end which need a platform. There are a lot of these services providers who are sitting just because they are building a low frequency use case. People would go to Haridwar once in a year. So these spaces actually are full of people who are willing to extract as much as money from a devotee as they can, because this person is not going to come again. And hence, a lot of people come back with a lot of bad taste in their mouth. So there's so much that has to, so there's desire to pay, there's desire to serve, there is desire to serve. It has to be bridged. And that's the view that we carry with our company, which is this. Now, coming to how we think about the monetization. Now, very large market, but the problem is it is built with many pockets. I'll explain what those pockets are. So one pocket is, let's say, if I'm an average devotee, where do I spend money when it comes to devotion, right? Let's say first one, I have a home temple and I would spend 5,000, 6,000 rupees every single year on upgrading the temple, or buying new clothes for the god, buying jewelry for the god. On top of it, there is money that is spent on consumables, where let's say I'll spend 30, 40, 100 rupees a month on puja consumables. Now, this is my spend towards my digital temple. Now, what we are doing is we are saying that, hey, there's a, physical temple, I told you the spends. The point is that, hey, we are building a digital temple. Could there be a digital manifestation of this physical spend? That's one thing we're figuring out, where that's one part. Second part is these devotees now trust you a lot and they don't have access. What is the access that they're seeking today? They're saying, hey, I trust your platform. There is a, and I was able to go to Haridwar or Ujjain 5 years back. My mom usually keeps on giving money to my relatives and say, do this offering, get this done, get that done, and so on. So there's a lot of access that people are looking for when it comes to temples and pilgrimages. Can you provide that access? Can you be the trusted platform around that? So we are enabling some of those accesses and people are loving it. My point is, you have to, again, build it from a viewpoint of trust. So can we, what are you guaranteeing? What are you serving? How well you are treating your users? You will not treat them as a number and so on. That's one part. Let's go to the other part, right? Where else do people spend? Spend on religious tourism. People do spend on consultations and whatnot. So all of this combined would give you that kind of market. But the problem is many of these are low frequency use cases. So let's say if I build a platform around digital puja, that's a once in 3 months, once in 6 months sort of frequency. So hence I have to keep acquiring this user over and over again. Similarly, let's say other spends I'm talking about. So you have to build a distribution platform where you acquire the user, you retain him for a long period of time. And if he sees these offerings on your platform, he would access it whenever he would need it. Now, what we are against is pushing people, hey, you have to do this now, is something that we do not want to do for our users, because it should not be fear-led, it should be trust-led.
Very nice, very nice. So largely, I think there are a bunch of digital offerings, and one interesting that you mentioned is a bridge. Essentially, there is physical offerings, there is the enablement layer which you guys are getting into, which is again very interesting, right? It's not just digital.
Is a primary source of revenue today. Using a digital enablement now. The bridge I'm talking about is something that we have started constructing. It is giving us good results.
Got it. So considering that's your primary, one interesting question I had was early days when Uber, Ola came in, right? Even if I were to look at it, even they were playing an enabling layer. We could probably hail an auto by going and walking and, negotiating with them, because in Bangalore, they never go by the meter. But in the early days, none of these guys wanted to sign up with Ola and Uber. Today, if you see, I think largely even, all auto drivers have a. So do you see a parallel here? Do you see any kind of resistance between, that market? I'd still call it a market where they feel like, okay, hey, everything should be done offline. Who are these players coming in? And I say 10 million downloads is a huge number in just 3 years, and they're only going to exponentially grow from here. So today, did you ever face like this some resistance from, we spoke largely up from the demand side, but did you ever face this kind of resistance from the supply?
See, temples and pilgrimages and these priests have now started understanding that going digital is something that they should seriously consider. One, if there's a local temple, they have a clear aspiration to be a Vaishno Devi or a Shirdi or a TTD, for example. And if you see, right, very well managed setups, have very strong digital presence, very strong devotee management, asset management, and whatnot. They do it very, very well. So, the other math that is coming out to be very clear for these pilgrimages is that the frequency of physical visits is actually very, very low. So you would visit these temples once in a year. In the highest pull cases, you would do it once in a year, every year. But in most cases, it would be once in a lifetime. But the desire to do things at those temples, pilgrimages and whatnot is many times a year. It's Ekadashi, my kid's birthday, this and that and whatnot. Now, can there be a trusted way to bridge this? Now, people do understand. So for a temple, I would say they are today making all the money from that one visit. By money, I would say all the financial support that they're making and all the economy around temple is being run by that one visit per year or one visit per lifetime. If you could just give digital boost to this visit, it is going to be magical for temple. The entire economy around temple is going to be benefited. I'll double tap on this part, right? Now, if there is a temple, let's say in Haridwar, which is, let's say on a daily basis, 5,000 people come. Now that temple in itself is serving at least 50, 60 households. Now, temple has been employing people, giving enablement and whatnot for generations now. Now, if you can just boost that economy and take this convenience cut from them, they'll be happy to give you. And it will give them boost. So that's the kind of ecosystem you have to create if you want to really, really solve for this particular market.
Got it. Prashant, since we're on this topic, I want a spicy take from you. The economics behind temples, right? I think it can be slightly touchy. On one side, we do have the devotional angle, which is, supposed to be very pure. On the other side, it feels like, at every step, and especially, I'm not saying this for all temples. Of course, there needs to be a lot of maintenance. In fact, Kishore Biani on a recent podcast mentioned that while the Future Group was scaling, in order to even understand how to manage that crowd, he and his team went down to TTD and saw how they're done. So some of them are managed fantastically, but sometimes it makes you wonder, like you mentioned, 5,000, 10,000 people coming on a daily basis, putting in so much money. Economically, where does all this money flow into? Some part of it goes into maintenance, but are a lot of temples cash rich? Are these trust? How does the economy of this entire system work?
Honestly, to me, it's a black box. I do not know what goes behind that, but the point being, I'm assuming that it's a good place, and people are using those money. For example, I was speaking to one of the trust members of one of the largest temples in Mathura, and they run lot of social initiatives. Basically, they run a old age home, they run a free college for girl education and so on. So the point being, a lot of these stories are also not told very, very well, where you just don't. And there's a general perception, right, that everything in it is for money and whatnot. See, I think that let's talk about devotee. A devotee seeks peace and happiness when he goes to a space like this. And I'm against extraction and using fear to leverage that to get that money, which is something which is a problem. But if I just remove that particular part, there's still a large set of people who contribute back, saying that this would go for some people. My point being, let's say there's a space that is created, which is very important for people, which gives them a lot of this mental reinforcement, peace and hope and whatnot, which is very important part of people's life. It keeps them going. And I would say I would just build for that feeling. My point is I honestly do not care with respect to how this whole ecosystem is. I really care about these 500 million, 600 million people who seek hope on a daily basis. If you can create spaces for them, which gives them this deeper value when times are tough, things are bad, it gives them this mental reinforcement. And actually, you should go back and read our reviews. You will see all of these things, right? The people say that, hey, I was feeling low in my life, I was feeling depressed, and a lot of, right? This gave me hope, this gives me strength. The point is, human beings work in very, very funny ways. From a science angle, you would say, how can this even give people? This is what we call as faith, right? He believes that going to this space gives him strength, so he gets that strength. Now, I would build for that particular behavior, and I think if we are able to give value to the users, we'll be able to build good value around it.
100%. In fact, the reason I asked you that also was, tying it back to your point on trust. Right. End of the day, people trust this more. They're going to come back to your platform. If there is one is this faith angle, and if that can be, linked back to trust, then I think that ecosystem is very, very powerful. Right. And especially like you mentioned, there is lots and lots of work that goes behind the scene that, if today it is a black box. And the reason I asked you because you're building in this space, if there's some insight that comes out of it. Because if that becomes more trustworthy to the end user, that cycle is never going to change, right? That is just that 1% doubt that comes in the mind of a devotee.
And for the same reason, right? I think hence in this case, right? When we are building this particular company, right? We are building it independent of temples, right? So for example, let's say people are coming to this digital space and they are coming to the app for this. It's a plus for them when they're getting this additional value. Correct. So my point is, I have built a company and we have built a company as a company in a way where we said that, hey, with their support, without their support, this company has to exist. And they would see that, hey, today by footfall, there's a digital space which is bigger than us. So for example, if you look at it, right, let's say 7 lakh people visiting our app every single day. Just by visitor count, we are larger than many of these. So for example, a lot of these people become inquisitive when they say, hey, let's do something together. I think that's the space we would want to be, where can we help all the stakeholders in this win? It will actually unlock massive value for all of us.
Very interesting. No, I'm super excited to see how this shapes up. Prashant, just for the paucity of time, might have to end this with a banger. I think, like we spoke about earlier, we're still today times are different. Like in 2020 when you started, and today when it's 2023. Would love to understand if there are new entrepreneurs who are looking at this space. Any pieces of advice that you'd like to share with them on the opportunities that still need to be unlocked, and second, from the funding winter point of view, how much do you think this has an impact?
So I think 3 years back, 4 years back, we did not see a lot of companies in this particular space. I think it happens, right? People see opportunity, they jump in. And I think we would need a lot of startups to be able to create a digital enablement. But my biggest apprehension here would be, how are you looking at this particular opportunity? Are you looking at a devotee as a customer? I would say that, hey, this will actually spoil the market for everyone if you go it that way, right? If you do things which will create mistrust, which will not honor a user well or not value a user well, it is going to spoil the market for all of us. And these things don't fly. My point is that all of us are welcome to be able to provide value to this user, value to this devotee, and they'll very happily open their wallets for all of us, for us to become large and all. My point is, when you see this whole space as a transaction and not as a behavior, that's what the problem is. I think it's more about the approach. Companies will take different approaches when it comes to building this for this particular category. We are taking a certain approach. We feel it's through data and through our primary, secondary data, we feel that this is the right way. Might take time, but it's okay. It's okay. Had this category, if this category was supposed to be built, it would have been built 10 years back or 5 years back, 6 years back, and whatnot. I feel that there is lot of fundamental brick by brick company building that someone has to do to be able to, let's say, build a generational company. And we as a company, we as a team are in it to build a generational company for that matter. So that's the approach. Now coming to fundamental, now we did raise some capital, but and we were fortunate to have people like MSA Novo and people like Sequoia Elevation who are backing us. But we realized that this category will take time. And hence, as we raised capital, we did not go into this spending spree that, hey, burn, and rush to the next level. So I think there is a lot of financial discipline that we have with us. And I think that will continue. My point is that things will not change as we go and build this. We are committed to serve this particular devotee, this particular user. And I think there is a lot to be built for them. And we are realizing that if a user is happy, if they love you, they trust you, they'll make sure that you exist. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think, Prashant, that's a very, very fundamental thing again that you mentioned, and one thing for people to walk away and think and ponder about. But fantastic chat. I think half an hour, 1 hour doesn't do justice to this topic that we chat about, and we hope to get another chance to bring you on the pod and go deeper into some of these anecdotal incidents. But thank you so much for joining us today. It was absolutely fantastic to learn about this. And with that, I will hand over the mic back to Sarah.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. Prashant, I think we definitely need another episode for you for sure. Suhas, thank you so much for these great questions. And it was such a pleasure hosting you guys on Beyond Borders.